Dealerships are the worst. They have made sports cars practically unattainable. They're pushing us out, okay? And I hate it, and I don't like it. The car behind me, this thing, okay, is a Nissan Z. It's a 2023. And if you guys didn't know, I'm Alex Martini, and I'm over here on Torque Motorsport, not to talk about the GR86 that we're drifting around, but to talk about this thing, because Nissan is one of our signed partners for Torque Drift 2, which means they're gonna be in the video game that's coming out, which if you hadn't had a chance yet, you can download that over at Epic Games Store, which is absolutely awesome. We got a driving experience getting released in like just a couple weeks, and we got a whole bunch of different stuff going live in just the next couple months. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm not here to just bag on dealers. What I am here to talk about is if this car, if the 2023 Nissan Z and just the Nissan Z platform as a whole, you know, is it gonna be a future drift car? Because a lot of people think the answer is automatically yes, but I'm not so sure. So before we jump into it, please don't forget to subscribe. And that's it. The 2023 Nissan Z, 400 horsepower, 350 foot-pounds of torque, comes at you in the performance trim with the limited slip differential that you need, a manual, because obviously you're gonna need one of those too, and just enough bits and pieces to make the car slide sideways. Now, here's the thing with this car. Most of the people that have gotten their hands on these cars have gotten them in either the automatic mode, which is or they're saving up for the old Nismo, which I'm not entirely sure why, because the markup is gonna be absolutely insane on these cars. But this one, particularly with no markup, was $55,000, which will probably be like $20,000 in like 5 years, which means it could make for a pretty awesome drift car. Here's the thing though, when you look towards the past of Nissan and their heritage of building motorsport cars, they have had a really good run of success. Take it all the way back to the early 70s. You had the Datsun 240Z, you had the 260 and 280 that not only were race cars in their own right, but they were also off-road machines, participated in off-road Sahara rallies, did everything they possibly could to show the world that not only were they a sports car, but they were a reliable sports car. Word on the street back in the 70s was that people used to trade in their Porsche 911 to buy a Datsun 240Z, which was literally marked up 2 times the MSRP because that's how much demand there was for the original Datsun. So Nissan is no slouch in this department. Following the 280Z, we got the likes of the 280ZX, and then ultimately we got the 300ZX, and probably one of my favorite, most misunderstood Nissans of all time, because in certain trims, you could also get that in a twin turbocharged manual option. You can get it with all the goodies you could possibly imagine, and this was before pretty much every single Japanese manufacturer went upside down because of just the fact that they were spending way too much money on research and development. But when the research and development got done with it and the salesmen started selling these cars, it only took a few years for the market to realize they were too expensive, they were too flashy, they were too luxurious. And so for a long time, the demand of the 300ZX ultimately came down just as fast as it went up. When Nissan came back in the early 2000s with the 350Z, a lot of people were wanting a twin turbocharged application, but nobody that was actually gonna buy one to drive really wanted a twin turbocharged application. What they wanted was something reliable, affordable, something that they could work on very, very well and wasn't gonna give them a bad time. And because Nissan is Nissan, they launched the 350Z. It was a 3.5 liter. It gave all the good enough bells and whistles to nearly give you 300 horsepower and some of the engine layouts. And outside of its obvious burning oil issues, it was a fantastic car. It came in 10,000 different trim options. Half of them were ugly and completely useless, but the ones that you wanted had a limited slip differential, good power band, manual transmission. The 370Z came out a bajillion years later and offered the same layout. Now, we're getting portions of that recipe in the 2023 Nissan Z, but we're not getting all of it. The engine layout of it being a twin turbocharged application already set me off for saying this probably isn't going to be the everyday drift car like you would see a Nissan 350 or 370Z. Not just the engine layout, but the fact of what it comes from. For those that don't know, the engine layout on this thing, it ain't too far away from what you're seeing in the Infiniti Redline Edition. And if you've been around those cars or you've been around the community that modifies them, it's not exactly the easiest thing to do. I mean, it should be. I mean, should the twin turbo platform be reliable, it should do pretty good. I mean, the power curve on these cars is absolutely nuts. And when we drive it around US Air, and even slide it sideways to the best of our ability, it is there. And there's already cars out there like Chris Forsberg's car, which is carrying a GTR engine in it, but even his other one is capable of sliding around and getting some good old smoke out there to say that it could be a drift car. Now, if you can get past the fact that most of the dealers are still marking these cars up $15,000, $20,000 to $25,000, you're now stuck with the fact of, well, then it should be good to go, right? And I would say, yeah, almost, but we're still got a couple bits and pieces that feel a little funky on the Nissan Z being a drift car. Number one, the infotainment and the transmission. The infotainment you can get over, but the transmission still feels a little soft. If you do plan on really jumping into a car like this and you want to get her around a track, you really want to get it sliding sideways, I do feel like it's going to cost a little bit more money outside of just the general basic tires, tune, and LSD. I think you're going to want to see some changes to the clutch. I think you're going to want to see some changes to the transmission as a whole. There's new cars coming out, sport cars, that have like a rev hang feature. And essentially what it's supposed to do is to help you when you're driving maybe in a spirited way. But ultimately all it feels like is that the transmission isn't connected to the input you're giving it at all, because you're shifting it, you're moving it from one gear to the next. And it's not like an upshift help or downshift help. It just feels like it's hanging out, making sure that you want to go to fourth and then putting the transmission in fourth. So it does require a little bit more there. And that really goes into the final conversation about the Nissan Z, is that it's not a very analog car anymore. It's a twin turbocharged, highly sophisticated, whole bunch of slew technical innovations that came from Infiniti that sit in this car. And even though we're not going to get into the ECU changes and the fact that these cars are already impossible to get a hold of, it does seem like this car is not going to be as easy to jump into to just slide sideways. And even 5 to 10 years from now, I'm not surely convinced that this car is going to be at your local grassroots drift events. In fact, I'd probably see it more so at Sports Car Club of America events than anything else. But you'll have to let me know if you agree or disagree, because the Nissan Z is an iconic platform. It's probably one of my favorite platforms of all time, since I owned a 78 280Z myself, and the fact that I've loved what Nissan has done with their cars. They do make them tried and true, but when they do spread out from what is tried and true, I'm usually cautiously optimistic to see if it'll actually hit. But maybe I'm just being a negative Nancy, and you can let me know in the comments below. Either way, we want to let you know that Nissan is in Torque Drift 2, so if you're looking to enjoy the new game to Torque Drift, you can go download that over at Epic Games Store. I'm Alex Martini with 2 underscores, and I'm over here on Torque Motorsport. We will see you on the next one. Adios.